Hello everyone. Today I'm going to take us through the process of installing virtual machines using Oracle VirtualBox. Oracle VirtualBox is a type 2 hypervisor. So I'm going to take us through the process of installing virtual machine in Oracle VirtualBox, and subsequently I am going to explain and show us the concept of files and directory. I'm going to show us how to create a user, and finally I'm going to show us how to install an application. So first and first, I like to preach the concept of a machine, operating system, and application. So different people may have different explanation for this, but this is how I like to look at it. When you have an environment, regardless how you want to look at it, you have your machine, which can either be a physical machine, a virtual, and it can be a cloud machine, right? And on your machine, you have your operating system. Operating system can be from any vendor. In this case, we are focusing on Linux, and specifically, we're going to be focusing on CentOS distro of Linux. There are so many distribution of Linux. I can't even name every distribution we have myself. It's a bunch of them out there. And once you have your machine, you have your operating system. At the top of your operating system, you have your application, which is what actually brings business logic. Your application is what brings money to the business. But your application cannot live in vacuum. So your application will rely on the middle layer, which is the operating system, and your operating system has to live in a machine. Okay, so having said that, I just want you to have in mind these three layers: your machine, your operating system, and your application, even when you look at your mobile phone. So you have a mobile phone from Samsung, okay? In my own case, I have a mobile phone from Samsung, and I have an operating system, Android operating system from Google, running on my phone, and I have different applications on that phone, like WhatsApp, like Instagram and stuff. I'm able to use these applications because there is an operating system on the phone, okay? And the operating system is being installed on the device itself. Okay, so let's go on to create a virtual machine. Again, I'm creating this virtual machine on a type 2 hypervisor. So the concept of hypervisor is an operating system, okay, that helps us to create virtual machines. Unlike other operating systems where you install applications on them, Hypervisor, on the other hand, you do not install application on those operating systems. Instead, you use Hypervisor to create virtual machines. Okay, let me go again. Remember I was explaining the three-layer concept of a computer, saying the machine, the operating system, and application, which means the operating system lives in the machine and the application lives on the operating system. That is the three-layer. You have your machine, operating system, application. Okay, now for hypervisor, you have your machine, you have your operating system, but in this case, your operating system is hypervisor. Now, you do not have an application on the hypervisor. Rather, you have the hypervisor that gives you the opportunity to now create multiple virtual machines. Now, in those virtual machines, you can now create multiple operating systems, different operating systems, and start putting your application, which means There are some operating system that takes application, and there are other operating system that doesn't take application, but rather helps us to create virtual machines. Those type of operating system are called hypervisor. And we have type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is when you install that hypervisor on a bare metal machine. It's mostly used in an enterprise environment. Say you purchase a brand new hardware, okay? And you can buy your type 1 enterprise hypervisor from different companies. The market mover as far as type 1 hypervisor goes will be VMware and Hyper-V, okay? You buy your operating system from those guys, you install it on your bare metal enterprise machine, and you can start creating virtual machines, okay? For type 2 generally is used for development and for personal lab, in my opinion, because and type 2 is such where you install that hypervisor on an existing operating system. Again, you install that hypervisor on an existing operating system. A good example, if you look at this is my hypervisor, and you can see it's showing on my desktop like an application, even though this guy itself is an operating system. It's a whole operating system, and I can create multiple virtual machines. Like right now, I have one virtual machine. I can come here and start a new virtual machine, okay? And this is just a word for you. When you're creating your machine, always try and follow a naming convention so that you know what you're creating. Like this, I have Linux Engine 001. The next one I'm going to create, I'll make it Linux Engine 002. If the next machine is a Windows machine, I can say Win Engine 003. So let's try something. Linux Engine 002. I'm installing a Linux operating system. If you are installing a Windows operating system or otherwise, you can specify Linux operating system. And at the beginning of this video, I said there's so many distros. I can't even mention them all. So in this case, I'm going to choose Red Hat 64-bit. Even this doesn't really do nothing, but continue. So this is where I specify the memory I want to allocate for this virtual machine. So one thing you need to know about memory allocation. So the memory you're allocating for your virtual machine will be deducted from the host machine. Your host machine is the machine hosting your hypervisor. Is the machine hosting all your virtual machines. Even though this guy is a virtual machine, they still make use of memory, hardware, and every other system resource. However, they get all this resource from the host machine, okay? In my own case right now, I'm using a MacBook as my host machine. So if my MacBook is using 8 gig of memory, now I've already provisioned 1 gig of memory to Linux Engine 1. If I'm giving 1 gig of memory to Linux Engine 2, that means my machine, the host machine, is actually using 6 gig of memory by itself. So that tells me if I am creating multiple machines in my hypervisor, I probably won't be able to go more than 4 or 5 machines, say 5 machines or 4 machines. Because by the time I allocate 1 gig each, let's say 6 even, by the time I allocate 1 gig of memory each, that is 6 gig, the host machine itself will still require some memory to actually run its own process, okay? So this is where capacity planning comes in. Before you even buy your host device, you have to think what exactly do I want to achieve? How many virtual machines do I really want to create? What would be the resource consumption of those virtual machines? So you have to plan all those things to help you actually determine the right resource to have for your host machine. So I'm creating a virtual disk of my physical disk. Just like I explained for the memory. So the hard drive, you are carving out some amount of storage from the original storage on your host device, specifically for this virtual machine. And you can see where it says fixed or dynamic. You can either do that, fixed or dynamic, okay? I typically love to choose dynamic because with dynamic, I only get the space I'm using. So if I'm saying I'm carving out 20 gig of hard drive from my host device, and my virtual machine is only using 10. So at the moment, my virtual machine is only getting 10. It's not taking all the 20 because there's no use for them. But if I do the fix, if I'm allocating 20 to this virtual machine, then it's taking the whole 20 from my host machine. And you can come here and move this around to change your storage allocation. Or you can come right here and change the number. Doesn't matter what you're doing. So it's saying it's failing to create our disk. We probably don't have enough space, so let me do 10 gig. Okay, let me go back here. Continue, dynamic, create. Okay. And I'm starting that. So you will notice something. When I clicked on start, let me go back and show us this again. When I click on power off, let me power off it. When I click on start, okay, I think I just messed that up. I'm going to start all over with the machine creation. Good thing is an opportunity for you to see the process again. I did Linux engine 002. I change this to Red Hat 64-bit. Continue. B2 1 gig. Create. Continue. Dynamic. And I didn't change this. I think we should be good with 8 gig. Create. And when I click on start, so I'm here now. So you can see the Syncto 6.10 DVD. And this is because I've actually downloaded this ISO image on my computer. If you have your ISO image on your desktop, and this is the first time you're doing this, you will not see this. In order for you to have your ISO, you have to click this folder, okay? And this folder will bring you to your host machine, resource. If you have your image in the download, you want to click on download. If you have it on the desktop, you want to click on desktop. You see this ISO document. I have different ISO in here. I even have Windows ISO. different Windows ISO in here, which is my operating system. But this particular operating system, I have it in my download. And this is it right here. Okay, if I click on this, then that is why you're seeing this here. By the time I do start, then it should load my operating system. And from here, I'll just hit enter. And I'm starting installation of my CentOS. I believe this is 6.9. See? Okay. So from here, we're going to do a basic install for now. You do your next, your language, English, your keyboard language, US English, and you have basic storage device, specialized storage device. So your basic storage is typically talking about your hard drive on your host machine, and we have other specialized storage we can also integrate with our system. But in this case, we're using our basic storage. So I'm going to do next. Yes, discard any data from our hard disk. Remember, this is the hard disk, virtual hard disk we created for this virtual machine. Remember, we had 8 gig. And it's saying this is the hard disk I'm going to use. The device is blank. I'm going to partition it and all that. Yes, if there's any data in this storage, while I'm doing that, you're going to lose the data. And we are agreeing to that and saying, yes, discard any data. So, host name, which is the name of the virtual machine. Don't forget I had mentioned, let's follow naming convention. At the beginning, we did engine, Linux engine 002. So you want to follow that naming and do next. So your time zone. So I'm doing America, New York. Next. So this is your root password. So some people get this mixed up. In Windows, when you're setting up your Windows server or your Windows operating system, there is a user on the system by default. It's called administrator, right? It's called administrator. While you're doing your installation, at the end of your installation, you'll be asked to set the administrator's password. Likewise, in Linux, we have an administrator, just that we call the administrator root, right? So this is asking us, by default, there is a user called root. Now you have to set the password of that user root so that by the time you log in, you use the same password to log in with the user root. So I'm going to use password, P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D. I don't just want to complicate things. Password. But the fact that Linux is a very secure operating system and it frowns at dictionary word, it's saying this password I'm using is weak. You know, whatever happens is up to me. You know, but because this is a test and just demo machine, I'm going to use anyway. If you're in a work environment, you don't want to use password as your password because that could pose a security vulnerability. Okay, so I'm going to use all space However, in the next video I'm gonna show us how to do a custom partition, which I love to do anyway. I'm gonna show us how to do a custom partition, but let's just go ahead and have the system do a partition right now. Right, changes to disk. I'm going to do minimal desktop, okay? In real work environment, 9 out of 10 times you won't do desktop. You probably do minimal or basic, depending on what you're doing. But I just want to do minimal because I know some of you by default, you are not going to move away from this and you're going to see a graphical interface and you'll be wondering, but I thought they said Linux is all black screen. Why do I have graphical interface? So maybe I should even choose the desktop so that I can clear the air on that in this video. But ideally, I'm going to choose minimal or basic server. So at the end of the installation, I'm going to have a black screen. But if you're choosing desktop, at the end of the installation, you will not have a black screen. You will have a graphical interface, but the graphical interface can now be converted into black screen, which I'm going to show you now. And one of the difference between doing desktop, minimal desktop, basic, minimal installation, and all that also is the amount of packages that will be downloaded. If you do minimal install, you're probably going to get around 220, 40 packages. Look at this. With the desktop, you see we are downloading 1,126 packages. But in truth, do we need all those packages? Most likely the answer is no. You know, if you don't need it, why are you getting it? And I believe that's one of the reasons in a production environment, we don't need desktop or installation. So you're most likely going to go with minimal. And then if the minimal you have doesn't provide all the packages required for your application, you can then install those packages using your package manager. Yeah, this is going to take some time. So I'm going to let this run. So now, once the package installation has been completed successfully, then we see this congratulations, your CentOS installation is complete, and we can click on reboot right here, and the system is going to reboot. And once completed, this is what we're gonna see. Welcome. Click on forward, forward. So I'm asked to create a user. Remember I said there's a user by default, which is the root user. So it's saying you must create a username for regular non-administrative use of your system. So let's say you just want to create a regular user. Now is not the administrator, which means this user will not have the same privilege as the root. Okay, now you can create that user. But I'm not going to create any other user. I'm just going to say forward. And it's going to say you did not set up an user account capable of logging in to the system. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes. So you can set your date and whatnot. Forward. So to enable, okay. There have insufficient memory to do that. So this is what I have. My system is completed. And you can see this looks like Windows, like graphical interface, you know. And this is because we chose desktop during our installation. But now if I click others and log in as root, and it's going to ask me for that password. Now this should get me in the system. Do not show this again. Close. Now I am in the system, right? And right now I can open a browser just like my regular Windows computer. If I type google.com, so I have Google working, right? I can browse the internet. I can go to gmail.com, right there. See that? However, I can also come to this application and go to System Tools and click on Terminal. If I click on Terminal, you see now this is command line. This is command line. You know, a lot of people still prefer to work here because if you install an application and you need to check your application, you don't need to go far. You can still do it on the same server because you have this browser right here. You understand? You can install your application and you can do everything right here in your virtual machine. You don't need to go back to your host. You don't need to go back to your host machine to do anything. Everything can be done in this Linux O2 machine. As a matter of fact, you can watch YouTube, you can do whatever you want to do in this machine. And if for some reason you need to delete it, all you need to do is to right click here and delete the server. That's all you need to do, okay? And you can have this right here. So if I want the black screen, also from this, instead of having the graphical interface, all I need to do is init3. Init3 takes me to command line. I'm currently working in init5, and this, I'm going to explain this also maybe in the next class. Enter. This is going to restart my system. By the time the system is back, you see, it's coming back in command line. And I can do root and I can do password. Now it's command line. If I want to take it back to graphical interface, I just do init 5. And by the time it goes and comes back, it comes back in graphical interface. So it's still the same server. So whatever you choose will determine what your server is going to come out in. In this case, it's coming out in graphical interface because we are running init 5. If I log onto this place and terminal, I'm trying to add the terminal to my desktop so that I don't come here every time, so I don't have to come here every time. Now I have my terminal on my desktop. If I click on my terminal now, so I can easily do everything I need to do, Same thing. And this would be the end of our training for VMware installation on Type 2 Hypervisor Oracle VirtualBox. And note, there are other Type 2 Hypervisor that we can also use to install our virtual machine. It's the same exact concept, just different vendors, and it's the same exact concept, okay? And don't forget, there's so many ways to skin a cow in Linux. This is just one way, which I consider very simple and very straightforward. However, there are so many ways things can be done, okay? Thank you and have a wonderful day.